Maximus Wilder, also known as Max, is a man with a muscular physique strength and a commanding presence. Stepping into the world of high-speed races and daring adventures, Max has established his place not only due to his impressive physique, but also because of his decisive, confident, and power-hungry personality. He is the leader of a group of motorcycle riders standing out in the community as the guide, and always the center of attention whenever he appears. Max is not only an excellent rider, but also a symbol of strength and freedom. Each time he takes the wheel of his motorcycle, it feels like time slows down, allowing everyone around him to witness the perfect combination of control and raw muscle power. With his broad physique, every muscle ripples under his worn leather jacket, and Max draws people's eyes, leaving them unable to look away. It is no surprise that he constantly attracts attention, not only because of his strong exterior, but also because of the aura he exudes whenever he appears. Max takes immense pride in his physique and lifestyle. He firmly believes that his muscular build and powerful presence are the keys to winning every race, not just on the track, but in daily life. He enjoys showcasing his dominance in every situation, from high-speed races to social interactions. He always wants others to see him as the strongest. The most powerful Max's life is deeply entwined with constant journeys and adventures on challenging roads. He feels like a wave that cannot stop, always seeking challenges and the thrill of conquest. Every time he speeds through the streets, everything seems to slow down, and the curious and fearful gazes of others follow him. In Max's world, strength and power don't just come from riding skills, but also from the adoration and respect he commands from those around him. Max never shies away from challenges. He doesn't just love the journeys, but he also enjoys being seen as a leader, someone who inspires the others in his group. He is the first to dive into action, the first to overcome every obstacle, and the first to feel the rush of victory. In this world, Max is the center, the one everyone admires and respects, always holding the position of leader in his motorcycle group. Although Max's life is full of difficulties and challenges, he faces them with an unwavering spirit. He sees every challenge as an opportunity to affirm his strength and never lets himself fade into the background in this competitive world. Max and his group set off on what seemed like just another journey, but this time they entered a small, peaceful town where everything seemed to move at a slow, calm pace. The roaring motorcycles broke the silence of the deserted roads, making the atmosphere there feel entirely different. The group entered the town with the power of their roaring bikes, as if to shake up the peaceful and familiar environment. With their gleaming motorcycles shining under the late afternoon sun, Max's group immediately attracted attention from the moment they arrived. The sound of their engines echoed throughout the town, making the residents stop and look their way. The eyes of the people followed, filled with astonishment, curiosity, and also some anxiety. These people had never been accustomed to strangers or bikes like theirs in their town. For Max and his group, the trip to this town was not a grand event, but for the residents it was something impossible to ignore. Each of the group's motorcycles stood out with worn leather jackets and muscular helmets, in stark contrast to the simple life of the town. It was as if the very atmosphere and environment changed as this group rode through. After stopping at a small cafe by the roadside, the atmosphere in the town seemed to shift. A light tension filled the air. The small cafe, a modest place where locals often come to enjoy a peaceful afternoon with a hot cup of coffee, was now disrupted by the arrival of Max's group. The cafe doors opened, and the gazes of the customers inside immediately turned toward Max's group. This small town is truly peaceful with its quiet streets, simple red brick houses, and the gentle light of the setting sun filtering through the trees. The golden rays cast down on the cobbled road, creating a strangely serene atmosphere. The air here carries no hustle or bustle of the big city, but only the calm, slow-paced life of a small town where everyone knows each other. This town is a world of tranquility, where there are no loud noises like the roaring engines of motorcycles, nor any unfamiliar glances from outsiders. When Max and his group appeared, they were the only strangers in this familiar space. The townspeople's eyes reflected anxiety and caution as they looked at this group of strong, powerful people. Perhaps in their eyes, people like Max and his group were simply outsiders, intruding upon a world they had carefully preserved in peace and safety. Max stepped out of the cafe, feeling the calm that enveloped the small town. Beneath the gentle light of the afternoon, the air turned fresh and cool in stark contrast to the noise and commotion that his group had brought with them when they passed through the town's main road. The roaring motorcycles had now gone silent, and all that remained were the sounds of Max's footsteps and a few townsfolk quietly observing from the cafe windows. Max looked around, his eyes scanning each townsperson, all of whom appeared confused and curious. Those looks made Max feel an indescribable sense of power. He wasn't just an outsider, but the center of attention in this peaceful environment. This attention felt like a surge of energy, making Max even more exhilarated, and at that moment, he didn't want to stop there. Walking around the cafe, Max stopped in front and saw two dogs sitting quietly. One was a gentle golden retriever with smooth fur and warm eyes gazing up at Max without a hint of fear, simply enjoying the peaceful afternoon. Nearby, a Doberman stood at attention, its body-tense eyes glowing like a warrior ready to protect its owner. Max could not let this opportunity pass by. He sensed a challenge in the situation, an opportunity to assert his power and confidence. The golden retriever was a picture of softness and harmlessness, while the Doberman carried strength and protection. Max wanted to test himself by drawing attention and act to demonstrate his power and disrupt the peace of this small town. Max glanced around once more before stepping toward the golden retriever. He bent down, looked into its gentle eyes, and lightly kicked its leg. It wasn't a hard kick, just enough to startle the dog. The kick didn't cause any pain, but it certainly made the dog panic and lose its calmness. Immediately, the Doberman stood up, eyes glowing and body tense, ready to respond to the threat. However, it didn't attack, but merely stared at Max, keeping its distance, showing that it had been trained to control its emotions and only attack when necessary. Max felt an overwhelming excitement, but at the same time he noticed the tension in the air. This event not only affected the dog, but also changed the atmosphere of the whole town. The people in the cafe had begun to pay attention to Max's actions, and some of them stood up, stepping outside to see what was going on. Particularly the older residents looked at Max with anxious eyes, seemingly afraid that things might escalate. Max stood still, his gaze fixed on the people around him. The sense of power enveloped him. The worried and cautious looks from the townsfolk seemed to acknowledge his position in this space. He wasn't just an outsider. He was someone with power, someone no one could ignore. This attention made Max feel even stronger, as if he could make anything happen, and no one could change it. He looked toward the Doberman, feeling in control, as if everything around him should fall under his command. This feeling fueled his excitement, and he continued to look around as if to assert that this was his world, and they were merely accidental guests. However, the silence and tension in the air didn't subside. People in the cafe had stopped talking, their eyes locked on Max and the dogs as if waiting for something to happen next. Passers-by also stopped turning their heads toward Max and his group, none daring to approach. The whole town, so used to its peaceful pace, now seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something to change. The silence enveloped the space. Max could feel every scrutinizing glance, every tense breath from those in the cafe. A fearsome silence hung over the small town, and everyone could feel the difference. Even though it was just a small action, it was enough to change the atmosphere here. The townspeople weren't accustomed to such tension. They were used to the slow, tranquil days with no disruptions. Max stood there like a conqueror, even though inside he felt a hint of unease. The Doberman still didn't make a move. Its gaze, though full of alertness, did not attack. It maintained its protective stance, but didn't want to escalate the situation any further. The golden retriever, after the sudden kick from Max, still sat quietly, its eyes worriedly watching him. Max began to feel the difference between power and real control. The whole town was still waiting. They were waiting for Max's next move. They were waiting to see if he would continue to cause disruption or if he would end everything and allow things to return to the peaceful state they had been in. But one thing was undeniable. From that moment, Max and his group had changed this town, at least in the hearts of those who were witnessing it. Jason Rivers is a man with a calm demeanor, but he is far from lacking in sharpness and strength. He doesn't need to demonstrate his power through violence or aggressive actions. Jason's strength comes from his ability to control his emotions and his firm psychological stability. Jason has lived in this town for many years, and he is not only a part of the community, but also has a special bond with the townspeople. With the respect he holds for the simple and peaceful life, Jason has become the ideal image of a man who doesn't need to flaunt his strength to be recognized. Though he rarely makes his presence obvious, no one in the town is unfamiliar with Jason. He always maintains a composed and respectful appearance. In fact, it is his calmness that makes Jason the person everyone turns to when they need advice or help. He can look at problems objectively and never rush to make decisions. Jason is not only a trustworthy person, but also a symbol of patience and wisdom. On a peaceful afternoon, when Max and his group stopped at the cafe, Jason was sitting alone by the window. He was enjoying a cup of tea, his eyes gazing outside, observing everything around him without interrupting the stillness of the afternoon. When the golden retriever was suddenly provoked, Jason's sharp eyes immediately detected the disturbance. It wasn't just a harmless prank. He understood that Max was intentionally drawing attention, trying to test the peace of this town. Jason knew that Max lacked self-control and was pushing the boundaries of the townspeople. Jason felt a slight concern in his heart upon seeing Max's actions. He understood well that this town had maintained its peace thanks to the mutual respect among its people. Max's actions not only disrupted the quiet, but also posed a potential threat to the community foundation that he and the townspeople had built over the years. However, instead of acting immediately, Jason simply observed and felt the situation, an action that reflected his calm and ability to restrain himself. Jason knew that if he didn't intervene now, the situation could escalate further. But he didn't rush into action, wanting to let Max understand that problems couldn't always be solved with violence or provocation. Jason decided to stand up and walk out of the cafe, heading towards Max. The whole town remained silent, everyone quietly watching to see what would happen next. As Jason approached, Max still maintained his arrogant attitude, showing no fear or concern. He looked at Jason, sneering as if challenging him. But Jason simply looked at him with unwavering eyes, not swayed by Max's imposing presence. He knew this wasn't the time to prove strength through violence. It was the time to demonstrate calm and emotional control. "You just hurt my dog." "Jason," began his voice, deep and strong, but with no anger. "I think you owe it an apology." Max laughed loudly, his eyes still unrelenting. "It was just a prank." "What do you think?" Max replied, clearly showing his disdain. Jason wasn't angry. He just gently shook his head. A joke should never hurt anyone or any living creature. Jason's words were gentle but carried an undeniable firmness. Max felt insulted. He couldn't let anyone disrespect him, especially someone like Jason. He moved closer to Jason, determined to prove he was stronger. But before he could do anything, Jason quickly stepped aside, causing Max to lose his balance and fall to the ground in astonishment. The Doberman stood nearby, not attacking, but still vigilant, as if waiting for its owner's command. Jason stood silently, his gaze unchanging. He knew Max needed a lesson on real strength, and that lesson didn't come from violence or the imposition of power, but from the ability to control oneself and protect the weak. While Max was still standing next to the golden retriever, feeling the excitement from his actions, a calm yet sharp gaze from the cafe caught his attention. Jason. The man, always calm and sharp, had observed every detail from inside, missing nothing. Sensing the tension in the air and understanding the danger in Max's actions, Jason decided that it was time for him to step in, walking out of the cafe with the demeanor of someone who was in no rush. Jason moved slowly and calmly, as if every step had been carefully calculated. He passed the townspeople, their eyes following him, waiting to see if there would be a confrontation. Jason was not one to show off, and he didn't want to create more chaos. But he knew that if he didn't intervene now, the situation could worsen. Max at that moment was still standing there, his eyes glowing with self-satisfaction and arrogance. He felt the attention of the crowd, and it only made him feel more powerful, though he knew his actions had scared the dog. Max didn't feel guilty. To him, it was just a prank, a way to show his strength and control over everything around him. He didn't think his actions could provoke such a strong reaction. When Jason stepped out and walked toward him, Max didn't change his attitude. He looked at Jason with cold, confident, and challenging eyes. Jason didn't rush. He simply stopped a step away from Max and looked into his eyes. "You just hurt my dog." Jason began, his voice deep and resolute. "I think you need to apologize," Max sneered, not caring at all about Jason's words. "It's just a prank." "No big deal," Max responded, showing no remorse. Jason didn't hurry. He just quietly stared at Max, his gaze sharp and unyielding. A joke should never hurt anyone. He continued, his tone calm but filled with seriousness. "I think you need to reconsider your actions." With his personality always seeking to prove himself, Max could not tolerate the challenge from someone he considered insignificant. He felt insulted and offended when a stranger dared to criticize his actions. Furthermore, Jason's apparent lack of fear when facing him only made Max feel more disrespected. Unable to let this go, Max decided that he needed to prove that he was the stronger one and that no one could do anything to him. Anger rose within him, and he lost all composure. He charged toward Jason with a powerful and determined motion. Max didn't just intend to talk. He wanted to demonstrate that he could defeat Jason right here, right now. Max's speed startled the onlookers. He lunged toward Jason with all his might, his muscles tensing as he reached his peak strength. But Jason, though still calm, quickly reacted. He had observed Max and understood his move in advance. As Max closed in, Jason moved swiftly, using his agility and self-control. Instead of directly confronting Max, he subtly stepped back, then turned skillfully, dodging Max's attack. Max, unprepared, lost his balance and surged forward, unable to adjust his body's center of gravity. Jason's movement was too quick and precise, leaving Max completely unprepared to respond. Max lost his balance, tripped over a small stone on the road, and fell hard to the ground. The fall was no light matter, and he lay still for a moment, dazed. The onlookers were shocked that Max, who had always prided himself on his strength and confidence, could be defeated so quickly. Surely no one in this town thought someone like Max could be brought down with such a simple and composed move. Jason stood there with no intention of further hurting Max. He gently shook his head as if it were no big deal and looked at Max with a steady gaze. Max at this moment felt utterly confused and angry. This was the first time in his life he had felt so helpless. He had never encountered anyone who could make him fall to the ground with just calmness and patience. The feeling of being defeated, even if just for a moment, struck him deeply. Max tried to stand up, his face flushed with anger, but he couldn't deny that something within him was changing. From that moment, he knew that strength wasn't always about muscle or dominance. Sometimes it was about control and composure in tense situations. When Max got to his feet, he looked into Jason's eyes and realized he couldn't defeat this man. Jason's gaze held no hostility or emotion, only calmness and understanding that Max had never known. With a simple, gentle move, Jason had taught Max a valuable lesson about true strength. Not through aggression, but through control and patience. Max stood in the middle of the small town, his eyes filled with confusion, while the people around him slowly returned to their daily lives, seemingly unaware of the profound shift in his mindset. Just moments ago, during his confrontation with Jason, Max had learned a deep lesson that he couldn't easily disregard. His feelings now weren't of pride in his powerful physique or victory through strength. Instead, he felt an awakening in his soul, a sensation he had never experienced before. Throughout his life, Max had always worshipped physical strength and power. He had lived in a world where everyone had to prove themselves by defeating others, showing superiority through acts of violence. He was the leader of his group, the strongest, and always commanded attention from admiring or fearful eyes. But all that he believed was right about power and dominance was shattered in a brief moment when Jason, someone he had considered weak, easily defeated him without using any violence. Max had once thought that strength was the only thing that could protect him in life. He believed that standing out and dominating were the most important things to maintain his position in the world. However, the confrontation with Jason had taught him that real strength wasn't about domination or bullying others. It was about self-control and understanding the value of compassion. The feeling of falling to the ground, defeated not by physical strength, but by the calm and wisdom of another, made Max rethink everything he had once believed. After this event, Max began to change his attitude and way of life. He not only gained a deeper understanding of the value of strength, but also realized that there were other values in life that he had never paid attention to before. Compassion, forgiveness, and the ability to control emotions, the qualities Jason demonstrated during their confrontation, were now things Max began to appreciate and learn from. He realized that calmness and wisdom, not violence, were what truly made people strong. Max no longer wanted to prove his strength through aggressive actions or by bullying others. He began to see himself differently, realizing that true strength didn't need to be shown through violent actions or the imposition of power. Sometimes strength lies in the ability to remain calm, in protecting the weak, and in patiently overcoming challenges without causing destruction or harm. With this shift in thinking, Max also realized that life had much more to offer than proving his strength. He began to cherish peaceful moments, true relationships and values that couldn't be measured by power or muscle. Max knew that he needed to change not just in his actions, but in the way he thought. It was a long journey ahead, but he was ready to begin. The lesson Max learned from Jason not only changed his perspective on strength, but also helped him better understand the connection between humans and animals, especially the dogs he encountered in the town. Previously, Max might have thought of dogs as harmless creatures that would simply obey if he demonstrated control and power. However, his interaction with the Golden Retriever and the Doberman changed his viewpoint. The Doberman, with its strong protective instincts and imposing appearance, could attack if necessary, but it did not do so without a real threat. This taught Max that strength does not always need to be expressed through violent actions. The Doberman's self-restraint ability to remain calm and refusal to attack when unnecessary provided Max with a valuable lesson on how to wisely use power. On the other hand, the Golden Retriever, though gentle and vulnerable, was a model of loyalty and unconditional love. This dog never showed fear or animosity toward Max, even though he had startled it. This made Max realize that true strength doesn't always have to be shown outwardly, and sometimes gentleness and affection are the greatest strengths a person can possess. The Golden Retriever taught Max an important lesson about love and loyalty. Despite being hurt, the dog did not respond with hatred. Instead, it only showed concern and sought to protect itself. The loyalty and love the dog had for its owner were a testament to the strength of compassion and kindness. Max learned that there are far greater values than domination and power that he had once pursued. After this event, Max began to view dogs differently. He realized that they were not just innocent creatures that needed protection, but also loyal companions with their unique strengths. Max no longer saw dogs as symbols of weakness, but as beings capable of love, patience, and teaching valuable life lessons. Max learned a great lesson from his confrontation with Jason and his interaction with the dogs. Not only did he change the way he viewed strength, but he also began to appreciate other values in life, such as compassion, patience, and unconditional love. The lessons from life, from the gentle dogs, from Jason's calmness and wisdom, helped Max become a new person who valued forgiveness and composure rather than simply glorifying violence and power. Max's story was a long journey to find balance in life, and he knew that the road ahead would be filled with challenges, but he was ready to embrace them with a new soul. After the intense confrontation between Max and Jason, this small town was never the same. Everything continued as usual, but deep in the hearts of the townspeople, there was a subtle yet profound change. Max, once the leader of the group with his muscular build and strong will, became a new role model in their eyes. He was no longer just someone who used strength to prove himself, but someone who had learned a valuable lesson in self-control and kindness. The townspeople, though initially wary and concerned about the arrival of Max's group, now looked at him with a different perspective. They had witnessed the change in him from a rude, power-driven individual to someone who was humble, appreciating calmness and compassion. They understood that Max wasn't just someone who had learned a lesson from Jason. Still, he was also a living testament to an important truth in life. True strength is not domination or violence, but the ability to control emotions and protect the weak. This lesson didn't just come from Jason, but also from the lessons Max received from the dogs he encountered in the town. The patient Doberman who remained vigilant but did not attack unless necessary was the gentle and loyal golden retriever, always ready to love and protect without any conditions. These qualities taught Max that true strength doesn't need to be expressed through brute force or coercion. Kindness, compassion, and patience are much more important traits. As Max gradually understood this, he also noticed a change in how the townspeople viewed him. They no longer just looked at his physical strength, but instead they respected the transformation in his attitude toward life. They saw him as someone who had matured, no longer a bully disrupting the peace of the community, but someone who truly understood the value of calmness and compassion. The story ends with a profound image: Max, standing outside the cafe where he had learned an important lesson about strength and composure. The sunset's light gently illuminated the small town, covering everything with a warm golden glow. Max stood there, eyes gazing into the distance at the dogs lying quietly by the cafe door, while Jason sat inside, gently enjoying his cup of tea. There was no noise, no challenging gazes or fear. Everything now was still and peaceful. Max lowered his head, his gaze directed at Jason, the one he had once considered an opponent, but now the one who had taught him deep life lessons. He felt the change in his soul. No longer was there pride in his physical strength, but a calm and serene feeling, a profound realization that true strength lies in emotional control and protecting the weak. Max understood that true strength is not something that can be measured by muscle or power, but by the ability to master oneself and treat others with kindness and patience. Max no longer viewed this town as a place to assert his power. He now saw it as a place where he had learned that true strength comes from knowing when to stay calm, when to protect the weak, and when to show compassion toward others. He felt lighter and freer in his soul. Max's story is not just about a person changing, but also about the true strength in life. The key message that the story conveys is this: true strength does not lie in violence or domination, but in the ability to control emotions and protect the vulnerable. A strong person is not the one who wins every battle, but the one who can face challenges without resorting to violence or imposing power over others. True strength lies in understanding, compassion, and patience. This message is clearly demonstrated through Jason's actions. He doesn't use physical strength or violence to confront Max. Instead, he uses calmness and intelligence to help Max realize that true strength is not something that can be measured by brute force. Jason has shown that sometimes calmness and the ability to remain composed in tense situations help us prevail more than displaying raw strength. Jason not only taught Max a lesson about strength, but also about compassion and patience, values he had never fully understood before. With the change in his soul, Max became a new person, not just strong physically, but strong in spirit as well. He understood that in life there are times when strength must be demonstrated. But one should never forget that true strength lies in self-restraint and protecting the weak in facing challenges without needing to defeat anyone. And that is the most powerful lesson Max learned, an important lesson about strength, compassion, and friendship.